school of rock do you come from? It's the school of rock where you play loud guitar, you have your own attitude, and you have your own way of approaching what you do, as opposed to the school of rock that follows what everyone else is doing.
There's a field, it's covered with snow. Each day I cross it to reach my home. And on that field, beneath my toes, grow poison berries and purple bows.
I have been influenced by the music that's around me, which is mainly Australian. And there's some really great Australian guitarists like Charlie Owen, Kim Salmon or Roland Howard. But there's not one particular guitarist that's influenced me. People try not to be themselves. They try to copy some other guitar player or learn some other singer or something. But I've never actually sat down to work out what other guitar players are doing.
I personally think, and I know this is not my interview, but originality is more important than even in how you can play.
I agree. And that's what interests me about music. People like you who grab ideas and turn them around into something that's their own.
Because I still believe there's very few lead guitar girl players around the world.
Yeah.
There are, but they're few and far between. And without it any being a novelty either, because you don't want to be a novelty. No. It has to be real.
There's a lot of guitarists that are good players that aren't unique, that can do sessions and they can play whatever chart you put in front of them. And their technique might be amazing. Their fingers can be really fast, but that doesn't mean that they have a strong creative streak or anything that's different or unique about them. So I think that the technique is great to have, but what makes a player that I respect and admire is somebody that does things in a different way, develops their own style, and contributes something to the advancing wave of music that hadn't been contributed to before. Penny does that.
Deniz and I agreed Penny Ikinger was a record we wanted to do.
I was amazed by the quality of the songwriting. They weren't only good compositions musically, but they had great lyrical content.
It's a real different sort of record. It's, you don't want to call it a rock opera or a song cycle, but there's some continuity to it, and I'm sure it's a chunk of her life translated into songs.
Tell me about your brother Kathleen, the one with the eyes.
She's really a storyteller, but she tells stories with this amazingly wide range of sounds.
I'd ever seen. Kathleen.
Penny, what inspires you?
Feelings in the lyrics, feelings in the guitar playing. So I try and get the guitar playing to suit the feeling of the song. So if it's some kind of gut-wrenching, heartbroken number, which it usually is, well then the guitar should see up and should express that feeling.
People often ask me what Penny Ikinger sounds like, and if you say she's a female singer, that doesn't really give them much clue, because does that mean Madonna or Joni Mitchell? You can say she's a singer-songwriter, and then they think, well, does she sound like Melanie? You always have to mention guitar. A real strength of hers is her guitar playing. I've tried to analyze Penny's songwriting and influences, and I don't know that she's listened to a lot of old music. Most people I work with, you can say, give us a Stones riff, or this is sort of a Who song. You can't say that with Penny, because those things don't exist anymore. Her music, it isn't blues-based. It isn't really hard rock.
Probably, I have to say, like myself, Australian post-punk would be kind of a good place to start, but that's just sort of a style and a place. There's a lot more to it than that.
Press in Europe have called the swamp pop was always the swamp blues or the swamp rock. Never the swamp pop. This is the first time.
The word original usually comes up, and I think that's the only way you can describe it.
I can hear the sort of 60s guitar-driven 60s punk that the Wet Taxis used to do. That's where she learnt to play guitar, really, and as she got better at playing guitar, her interest and her spirit came out.
What do you think the music scene was like in the 80s?
Well, there weren't many girls playing then.
No, there weren't, were there?
No.
I mean, I know when we started, girls in rock bands didn't even headline. It didn't matter how many records you sold, if you were a girl, you would be second on the bill.
At that time, I was interested in what the girls who played instruments were doing.
I don't remember any instrumentalists around.
Well-
Lindy Morrison from the Go-Betweens.
Yep, Clare Moore is another one who's a drummer who plays with Dave Graney.
Okay.
They played in the Moodists. She was around in my era.
In the punk rock scene, everybody got up and played, so there were more girls playing back then than there were just before that scene.
Melbourne tended to have the arty stuff, like the birthday party, and Sydney tended to have the more straight-ahead rock and roll, like Radio Birdman or the New Christ.
There was a lot of female bass players for some reason. There weren't that many drummers apart from when I moved to Melbourne and ran into, Kathy Green, Lindy Morrison, and a few others.
There's also Diane Spence who played saxophone with Lewis. But really there weren't many girls playing instruments. We're talking very early 80s. As it went on, I met a few more, but you did feel very isolated because you were on your own.
Tell me when you first picked up the guitar.
Well, that was sort of by accident actually, because this friend Bruce Butler bought me a 12-string acoustic for my birthday. I was 19 at the time. Before he came around to my house, my younger sister said to me, "Oh, Bruce has got him this really great present." And I was thinking, oh, earrings, necklace, diamonds.
Right.
And he rolled up with this goddamn guitar, and I thought, what the hell am I going to do with this? Then it sat in my room for a couple of months, and then I thought, well, look, I might as well learn how to play it. Then I went up to Sydney and became very close friends with Lewis Tillet. Lewis was a singer in Wet Taxis, also played piano.
First time I met Penny was at Sydney University. We actually happened to be studying a couple of subjects in the same course. It was a BA. Penny's ambition at that time was to end up hopefully working in a museum, which I believe that she does now.
Lewis used to teach me how to play guitar. Now, he actually couldn't play guitar himself, but he knew a lot more about music than I did.
She started off playing bass, and I suggested, why don't you play guitar? And her comment was, I would never play guitar, it is too phallic. And maybe that's a sign of the times and the nervousness of the time about having a female guitarist. We're talking 1980 or something like that, the times of the so-called cock rock, so that's probably what she was getting at. But then she found that obviously she could express herself more fully on a guitar and explore more sounds on the guitar.
Lewis used to work songs out for me with like Buzzcocks or Stooges.
And would spend a bit of time helping her work out parts.
And then I'd practice, and then he would test me. He would stand outside the door from where I was playing, because he said you could hear the intonation better. Yeah, Lewis. And he would test me, and he'd come back and he'd say, well, you got this bit right, but you've got to do this and you've got to do that, blah, blah, blah.
She later took lessons from a very good guitarist called Colin Watson, who helped her a lot. Once she had worked hard on getting a basic fretboard technique and picking and strumming technique, then most of her work was on actually sounds. In fact, the person who was probably has had the greatest influence on Penny and her guitar playing and her sound was Simon Nucky, the original guitarist from Wet Taxis, and he made sound an art form. He was very accomplished technically, but it was all about sound.
I joined Wet Taxis, which Lewis was the singer of. That was the first band I played in.
The rhythm guitarist left, and she had been practicing her guitar for some time, and that's why she wanted to join the band. It's Wet Taxis, I think, started in 1977. I think Penny started playing Wet Taxis in 82 and 83. So at the time Penny started, we were playing all covers and 60s garage punk. The first Wet Taxis recording was an Atlantic song called Come On. We did that single. Then we seemed to have to produce the inevitable album. We put together a whole mishmash of live recordings, bits and pieces. It was called, for our debut album, From the Archives. Then we did a single, Sailor's Dream, and they were the only recordings of Wet Taxis. It wasn't uncommon for a band to be able to play 2, 3, 4 times a week. Wet Taxis fell into the fortunate situation of we were always able to draw anything up to a few hundred people to each show.
In the 80s there were heaps more gigs, you made good money, and there was this system in place where bands would, like headlining bands, like say yourself, would take other bands on the road, baby bands,
and you would learn the ropes.
Like for instance, say I remember with Wet Taxis we did a tour with Midnight Oil and learned how to play one song straight after the other, because if you left like a 10-second gap, people would start yelling,
throwing Mom, nourish your tits,
and throw things at you, so you had to get your act together really quickly.
I continued to play music after Wet Taxis folded, and he recorded with me on 3 other occasions.
Lewis went solo, so I played with him. Charlie Owen played guitar in that band as well.
And Penny was in those solo bands, Lewis Tillet and the Ego Trippers and the Aspersion Cast as rhythm guitarist. It was a piano-driven group, you know. Even though I had 2 guitars, but it was driven by Lewis. That was late 80s, 90s.
There was a wave of Australian independent music that hit in the early 80s and went right through the 80s, and the European market loves that stuff, and they think that that's Australian rock.
Penny's from the same era. The first time I saw her play was in Lewis Tillet's band when I was touring with the Beasts of Bourbon in Europe. I think it was in Austria. So that to me, I think of Lewis Tillet as part of that generation of Australian rockers.
I played in another band, Kings of the World, with a woman called Janine Hall. Now Janine used to play bass in the Saints. Played in another band, Red Dress, with Kathy Green, who played drums with X. And Mary Ellen Stringer sang in that band, and she also sang in Kings of the World. Yes, we did.
Supported Divinyls.
Red with John Jett.
Oh, well, there you go.
Classic.
She and I ended up in the hot tub, but she wouldn't be herself. She ended up wearing a blonde wig.
Did she?
In the hot tub.
Why?
She didn't want to be Joan Jett. She wanted to be somebody else in the hot tub. Did you enjoy working with all girls?
I got a lot of things out of being with all girls. One thing I got out of it was confidence, because when I was playing with boys, you'd always kind of let the boys lead the music. You played a more supportive role. But when I started playing with girls, I became the only guitarist in the band, So I had to start to extend myself musically and play things that I didn't think I was capable of
So you
playing.
stretched.
Yeah. So that really improved my guitar playing. So I suppose I learnt my basic skills off the boys, but I developed my own way of playing guitar when I started playing with the girls. I'd gone through a string of playing guitar in bands that just kept breaking up. Like we'd just be about to get somewhere. We'd just have some record company interested or something would happen, and then the goddamn band would break up, and usually that was because the goddamn singer had decided they wanted to do something else. Because these bands kept breaking up, and then I decided I had to do my own thing.
And do you think when you decided to front your own band, as opposed to you always had singers before, that was a real turning point? That was the turning pivotal point in your career?
Yeah, it was a huge step. And also in my life journey.
Right. Has that been difficult for you to front a band?
I actually had to do a lot of work on my personality to turn my head around to believe that I could do this thing. I knew I could write music, but I didn't think I could write lyrics.
It was, I think for her, that was a move away from, being in other people's bands and having to work to other people's agendas. I think it was, something very important for her to assert herself and declare what she was.
It's just the thing these days. If you want to write music, you're expected to perform it yourself. Who's going to sing my songs if I don't do it? I have to do. But when you're a backing musician and you all of a sudden are singing lead, it's like you've never been on stage before. Because when you're a backing musician, you just don't think anyone's looking at you.
She came in to do some demos with Carolyn Kennedy from Dead Star as the guitar player, and I loved her guitar playing, and I remembered her from the Wet Taxis from the 80s. They were awesome, and she was a girl, and she played loud, distorted music, which I found unusual at the time. During probably drunken discussions at the end of the session, I would have said something like, if you should come in and make a record, and she would have said, I haven't got any money, and I would have said, that doesn't matter. I didn't feel like the record was going to get made if I didn't get behind it, and I thought that would have been a big shame.
I've been looking through
There's a overriding current in the material that definitely has a sadness to it, I think.
A lot of songs come out of strong feelings,
So-
and usually they're sad ones.
Right, so the more fucked up you are, the more sad
The
you
more
are.
songs I get.
The more sad. That's what
Yeah.
I said to you. Go out and get yourself romantically in trouble, and then you'll have a whole album. What comes first? The riff, the music, or the lyric?
Sometimes I'll get a flash, like a guitar riff, sometimes I'll get a lyric or an idea. No rules, and I think
No formula.
no formula, and I think that's the best thing to do.
I've always been anti-formula too. I think
Yeah.
whatever.
With the Electra album, I was trying to make every song have its own little picture, its own story, its own sound, its own sonic entity.
I think her songs, if you sit back and listen to them, they do create visual images. If you're open to that, to seeing sound.
And the way she plays with all the instruments, she's like a music director of her own orchestra, which might be only her guitar.
On one song called Stuck Inside, I whispered that song. That song was about someone whose shadow has left them. I don't have a loud, powerful voice. Like for me, the power's coming through the guitar, but the singing is like an antithesis.
your searing solos and your foot damage is where you really let go. I find when you play guitar, you pour out emotion. If you didn't write songs and have that outlet, how do you think you would be in your life?
Mass murderer?
That's what I say. People say, what would you do? And I say, I'd be a murderess.
You'd be good at it.
You'd be a murderess.
She goes from very straight sort of rock arrangement stuff into things that have no regard for time or key. It has an element of free jazz in it.
She doesn't use totally avant-garde sounds. It's still guitar-driven sort of sounds and those sorts of sounds. She's just trying to get sounds out of a guitar that she hasn't necessarily heard before.
I'd say, you know, Penny falls into the sort of individualistic, iconic kind of thing more than the technician side of things. For certain, she'd be more like a guitar player like Roland Howard or Keith Richard or those sort of people that you don't know them for what amplifiers they use and what strings they use and a lot of technique. It's more about the stylistic, emotive aspects of guitar playing, trying to extract some kind of emotion out of the instrument.
Electra album, it was very important for me to play all the guitar on that album because I felt that if I didn't, then people wouldn't recognise that I could play guitar. And
there's not many good lead guitar players,
no.
So I think it's important that you think like that.
I like how she plays really long, slow patterns that, you know, it's not necessarily a real kind of shredding way of playing. It's more
evocative, sort of strangle the beast kind of twisted turmoil.
Long, slow things and building up to something without being frantic. I like the fact that she doesn't, you know, expend too much energy. I dig that. I always used to do that when I was playing drums. You don't want to be sweating up there or anything.
I like how it sort of walks two ways at once. It's kind of evocative and serene on the one hand, and then on the other hand it's kind of extreme and antagonised.
Do you think the female rock experience is different to the male rock experience?
Most definitely.
How? Explain. Please explain.
The biggest difference I find is that often you're on your own.
People find it really intimidating when a woman's playing guitar or drums. I think they're frightened to come up and talk to you, actually. It's a strange thing to do, you know, it's odd. It's too weird for some people to even look at you doing. Like the Karen Carpenter thing, you know, all these experts were coming out and saying she wouldn't get out from behind that drum kit. And I just thought, well, maybe she wanted to play the drums, but I don't think people feel comfortable seeing women do certain things, and I think drumming and playing guitar are two of those things.
I went to your gig the other night and there were a lot of men there. Probably more men than women. Mm-hmm. Which, you know, to make it in Australia, in a rock world, you've got to have a lot of men. Men have got to really like you. And I noticed that with you the other night. There were a lot of men in the audience. And we're not talking about girly men. Mm. I mean, there were a lot of bikers. There were, you know, tough guys in the audience. Mm. And they were listening to you and accepting you musically. Mm. But the fact that you have so many men in the audience is a real credit to you, that you are accepted. Mm. Because I think men in Australia are notoriously cruel to women in rock and roll bands if, you know, you fall short.
Mm-hmm. People see a girl playing drums, say, or guitar, and they would probably like to see me and Penny do bitching licks and drum solos just like guys, you know. But we come from punk rock times. Drum solos were outlawed when I was 17 years old. I'm not going to do one. And, you know, I think it's a similar situation for Penny.
With my guitar playing, I very much tried to avoid the things that boys take as being, as qualifying someone as a good guitarist. Like the boys
playing fast?
Yeah, playing fast, lots of scales.
But you're more of a part player. You play part and rhythm.
Yeah, part and rhythm and sounds. I'm interested in sounds, so I wanted to have the same kind of masculine energy in my music, which is can be aggressive. But you don't play those. You don't play fast solos and no.
You know, that kind of show off. You're more of a pretty parts and, you know, interesting parts, which has always been the way I love guitar anyway.
Female musicians do tend to be, well, the ones from that time, they're really quite different to everybody else.
Because she's been a rhythm instrumentalist, but she avoids all the cliche things that lead guitarists learn. Guitar cliche, lead lick number 3, going to guitar lead lick cliche number 5, 7B. It's more sound driven and bends in and out of tune and comes in at places that not necessarily are the standard place where you put a guitar solo, and that's the good thing. That's what's fun about it.
The Australian rock scene is always notoriously been male dominated, hasn't it?
But then hasn't every rock scene?
Why do you think that is?
Because rock is about aggression and is about power and energy and confidence, and they're traditionally male characteristics. What you've done, what I think I've tried to do too, is put the feminine aspect into that.
A girl playing guitar as opposed to a tomboy.
Yeah.
And that was always important to me. I never wanted to be like a tough tomboy. No, I always wanted to be girly up there.
Yeah.
Still be feminine.
Yeah.
There's lots of irony in that with us, I think, both of us. I like that. I like those contradictions.
There's another aspect of Penny that I really, really love. It's her glamour. It's really female and it's really rock. And that's what's inside the record. It's full of glamour and electricity.
One thing I think is important with this record is I don't think it's going to date. I think it's going to sound good forever.
People like Penny and others that have always pushed the limits of the now, whenever it was. And those people exist out of time and out of any particular movement.
Just try and do your own thing and you be yourself. To me, that's the most important thing. The more you access what's inside yourself, the more your music is going to be unique, because it creates a really strong foundation and it will give you longevity in your music
and originality.
Yeah, and I want to write.